Hey, you know
Hey
what it is? It's
there.
Brent. It's Brent Leary. It's what I call the BBC, not the British guys. It's the Brent Broadcasting Channel, and we're back 2 days in a row. Yesterday, I had a really good conversation with Adam Blitzer from Salesforce, and today we're gonna have another good conversation. And actually, it's kind of ironic that the guy I'm going to have the conversation with today actually ran into Adam. I think it was at Sunday. They were doing some kind of a wine tasting thing. Yeah, something that I probably would never run into either of those two at. But it's good that I get these highbrow people on my show here. And Scott Beechuk,
It's called. Thanks, Brent. Thanks for that. It's a nice warm intro. I appreciate it. No,
hey
it's
man,
called getting out of San Francisco for a second to get some fresh air.
hey, it's good to see you, man.
You
I'll have a little
too.
fun, but it's actually really good to see you. And first of all, of course, Scott Beechuk, he is a partner at, I want to make sure I get it right, Norwest Venture Partners.
That
Thanks
is
for joining me,
correct.
man. Thanks for joining me.
It's great to see you as always, Brent. Great to reconnect.
I think the last time, I got to bring this up, man, because it's still like a pain, a thorn in the side of both Paul Greenberg and myself. Because I think the last time we saw you, we came to the desk.com headquarters, and we were there to shoot this like day long CRM players on location video. And I mean,
I remember
we had
that.
a host of people that we did all these really great video conversations with. I mean, we had Marie Rosecrans. She did a great piece. We had you, and who was the other gentleman we were with when we were having a conversation with you?
John Agnano.
That's right. John, I'm glad because it's hard for me to say Agnano. John Agnano. That's right. We had an awesome conversation. And then we had like we were there for like 3 or 4 hours of just great
Good
what we
times.
thought great times,
Well,
great
I
conversations, and
enjoyed
nobody
doing
will
it.
ever see those. Yeah, I enjoyed doing it, but nobody will ever see those episodes because there was some kind of a mix up with the actual video. And so I'm glad that you and I both have the memories because that's pretty much all we're going to have from that conversation.
Well, it was one of the more enjoyable discussions I've ever had on camera. And we did, I mean, it was a lot of CRM, tech talk, business talk, all that good stuff. But as I recall, we also got into some other interesting topics like whiskey. So it it was good. I mean, I'm, call me a conspiracy theorist, but somewhere in this world that footage exists. And when we do find it and we dig it up, I can't wait for you to show it to the world.
If that happens, I will let you know first. We will do a preview showing before we show it off to the world. But no, seriously, it's great to see you again.
You
And
too.
before we get into this conversation, because I need to ask you a lot about what's going on with VC and particularly with the enterprise software side of things. But as I try to do every time I have one of these conversations, I like to start it with a simple question. Um, do you have a favorite football team?
Well, so Brent, as you, I think I grew up in the Midwest and specifically Ohio and Michigan.
Mm.
And for those who recall that those states do have professional football teams, namely the Cleveland Browns and the Detroit Lions, which were the teams that I was the closest to. I don't have a lot of great stories of success and winning over the years. We had Barry Sanders. We had a couple other highlights throughout the years, but I know you're a Rams fan, and gosh, got to respect that. So I'm not going to try to compete here. I'm just going to tell you that moving out to the West Coast, love the Niners and all, but and I'm sorry about the game the other night. Wasn't fair. I feel for you. They're not my team, but I do. I'll enjoy a good game anytime, and I'd love to go see a Rams game with you sometime.
Hey, that'd be awesome. And look, I kind of feel your pain, man. The Browns and Lions aren't those two of the like 4 or 5 teams that have like never made it to a Super Bowl? I mean, it's kind of tough,
Browns
man.
actually made it, believe it or not.
The Browns did to a Super
As I
Bowl?
recall. No, we're talking like probably 25 years ago. I have to go back to my history. Somebody needs to fact check me on that one.
I'm going to
Lions,
fact check you right now. I'm telling you right now, the Browns have never, ever, ever made it to a Super Bowl. I mean, they came close because remember
maybe it was getting
the
close.
drive and the fumble. I mean, does that kind of ring?
Yeah, sometimes you just kind of like want to squint your eyes a little bit and dream. And so maybe I think we
Look
were
at Sean Whiteley there.
Yeah, there he is. Hey, Sean.
Guilty on both counts, man. Absolutely.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Well, Lions for sure. No, but man, we were proud fans. It's just this year, Lions. I think we're 2-3 right now, which isn't a great record. What are you guys, 2-2?
No, we're 4-2.
4-2. Okay.
Should be more than that. But anyway, all right. I digress.
Good for you.
Hey, look, as long as your answer wasn't you're a Pats fan, we're good to go, man. We're clear sailing, so we're all right.
We can move on to the next subject.
so I mean, seriously, you've been, because I knew you when you were at Salesforce, and then you left Salesforce and you went to Norwest, right?
That's correct. Yeah, I had a 0-day break between the two. I really did a lot of traveling during that time, and it took some time off.
Did you were you trying to find yourself as a Browns fan, or no? I
don't even know we need to spend any more time on this one. That's a dark place.
All right. So how did you get involved with VC, man? Tell us about that.
Yeah, VC was one of those things where I'd spent probably more of my career as an entrepreneur than I had. I spent almost 7 years at Salesforce, but I love building companies, and it's always been something that I've enjoyed. I was a software developer out of undergrad and thought maybe I could build software myself. Turned out not to be the best software developer in the world. Sitting behind a screen for too many hours at a time, I kind of lose my mind. Start popping up out of the cubicle like a gopher and looking around to try to find somebody to talk to. So that's when I realized, I just really love building companies. And so we went on about a 15-year journey as an entrepreneur and built 3 companies in a row. And that's what led me. We sold our last company and led me to Salesforce. But I knew someday I wanted to get back into the building company mode. And you can either do that as an entrepreneur, which was definitely on the table. But VC, especially with Norwest, which is a great platform, just gives you the opportunity to work with a lot of great companies and a lot of great entrepreneurs. And so that it seemed like a logical next step. And I love it every day, and just love the entrepreneurs that I work with. Sean Whiteley, just jumping in there a second ago, he's one of the co-founders in the portfolio. So it's always great to see smart people, creative people doing innovative things and being part of that.
By the way, Sean left an extremely long comment about the Browns. I'll let you read that after we're done here. I'm sure it'll be of interest to you.
Can't wait.
So yeah, tell us how different or what did you think VC going in to that era, that industry? What were your expectations and how were they different from what it actually was?
Yeah, I'd always been on the other side of the table. So I was the entrepreneur who was pitching and having the VCs on the other end side of the table basically tell me no most of the time and tell me all the reasons why that company that I was building was never going to be a big category. We were a feature, not a company, or I was a 24-year-old who just didn't know what I was doing. I mean, that was kind of the feedback and that was my experience with VCs. But there were like 5% of the VCs that we worked with that invested in us that were incredibly helpful. I mean, they brought more than just the capital to the table. They brought a network. They brought customers. They brought experience. They helped me avoid the massive potholes that a lot of early entrepreneurs make that just haven't been around the block a few times. And though that advice, guidance, and just help at the board level was just so incredibly powerful. And I thought maybe one day I could be one of those people who was in that 5%. Now, I'm 3.5 years in at Norwest, and I'd love to. The companies that I'm working with right now, I think are the best companies that I've seen in a really long time. So I feel great about that side of it. I'd like to think that I'm adding value, but that's my job, is to constantly try harder to give back to the companies that I work with and I like to treat myself as an employee of the companies that I invest in. right? So if they can see me as an extension of their team, then I'm doing my job.
Oh, okay. So tell us what your focus areas are.
So not surprisingly, I love anything having to do with the customer engagement, CRM. And CRM is such a broad category now. It started as Salesforce automation. Now, then there's customer service, where I spend a lot of my time at Salesforce. And there's MarTech. And now there's all of these derivative categories. So, just to call out the company, since Sean jumped in there, this company Qualified. So what they're really doing is that's kind of it's a lead capture, lead qualification, sales acceleration capability. So where Salesforce is the master of all things customer and all things experience and history, a company like Qualified front ends that whole thing and says, hey, here's an anonymous lead who's coming to your website. Let's bring up everything that we know about this person the second they arrive, pull it out of Salesforce because they're built on Salesforce, and then just provide that to the account executive or the SDR and say, hey, engage with that anonymous visitor. And maybe we know what company they're coming from. Maybe we even know who they are based on, some tracking, some cookies or things like that we've seen. And have a meaningful, deep conversation with somebody. Don't just try to sell to them, try to build a relationship at a moment where historically over the last 20 years, nobody's been doing that. You get all of these visitors to your website. Most of them come and go. Some of them ask for a demo, sign up, but most of them just end up leaving. So that idea of engaging with customers at a deeper level, that's what really gets me excited. Because now with data, we have so much more data today about our customers, about the products that they like to buy, about the demographics, the psychographics, all of these different things. You overlay that with machine learning, deep learning, all of these different AI techniques, and it just gets really exciting because you start to picture a world in the next 10 years where the noise level just falls and the personalized engagement goes up. The relevance in engaging with customers just becomes more real and more personal. And the truth is, we are now in a position to decrease all that noise and spam and just create more real relationships between brands and consumers. And that's pretty exciting to me. I mean, I want the world to become more human, and I want brands to become more human. And I think there's a path forward.
By the way, Sean, we need to talk at some point too. It's been a while since I talked to Sean, and I think he'd be actually a pretty good guest for this too. So we'll talk later on, man. Absolutely. So tell me, we're about 7 to 8 months into the pandemic, and the pandemic, of course, has forced foundational changes in so many different ways, not just how we shop, but how we live and do things. And some of the ways those changes have, been forced on us, some of those changes will be permanent. So talk about how the pandemic has kind of impacted your outlook and your approach to what you do. If you could kind of take us through, if there are any significant changes, has it changed the kind of companies you're looking for or the kind of criteria that you're looking for? If you could just tell us a little bit about how this whole episode has kind of changed your approach to what you do.
Yeah. And I think that's the $1 billion question is how is the pandemic and just the nature of working remote and the nature of engaging with people when you're not face to face, how's that going to manifest, and how are there tailwinds that we can look for? Obviously, you see, the video communication companies seeing huge tailwinds for those. That's kind of the most obvious answer. But I start to look for what are the companies that are enabling us to connect and just sort of build relationships at a distance. And sometimes building relationship is actually a little bit, it can lead to transactions as well. So I look at online commerce, and I look at the way that digital transformation has manifest in all kinds of industries. Retail is a really, really important one because it's a multi-trillion-dollar industry. And how the retail companies that were behind and had planned to go through these multi-year transformations to build this ideal scenario online where, you know, they got this incredible presence, mobile and web, and just like every touch point with their customer. Now they're snapping their fingers going, okay, we got to make this happen now. And so there are a lot of really interesting enabling companies that are helping retailers get to market faster with a digital solution. And sometimes that's as simple as an e-commerce site. Other times it's ways to engage with customers in an omni-channel way that, you know, they hadn't prioritized before. Because if you're a retailer or a CPG company of any kind that relied on brick and mortar locations, you might have been actually doing pretty well before the pandemic. But now all of a sudden you realize, oh my gosh, that's just not what the future holds. Now, probably a year from now, and who knows, maybe indefinitely into the future. So they're scrambling and trying to find ways to solve that problem. So I would say the remote work side of things is really interesting, and all the enabling companies and technologies there. But then all of the enabling companies that are allowing not just retailers, but certainly retailers as a huge category, but anyone who has to transact, there's a commerce portion to what they do to go helping companies accelerate that digital transformation.
One of the things that a lot of people have focused on, you know, beforehand, but it seems like the focus has been more emphasized and accelerated, of course, is how, you know, on customer experience and the digital transformational aspects around customer experience. And one of the things I think you're seeing growing an impact almost exponentially, it feels like, is the relationship between customer experience and supply chain management. You see that, you know, part of the customer experience today when they order online is they want to make sure they get the stuff when they get, you know, when they're expecting to get it. Maybe you could talk about, like, are you seeing any other kind of the relationship patterns or changes between, you know, different kinds of enterprise applications, particularly around CRM-ish kind of things, and how that's impacting maybe the decision making to go after this kind of company or that kind of company?
Yeah, you know, I think there's a lot of optimization left around just the entire buying experience, and it's not just a digital problem. It's actually, I was just discussing this the other day with somebody about the fact that there's so many ways that we can create an Amazon-like experience for any retailer in the world. Because Amazon has obviously pioneered the idea of owning the entire supply chain from the beginning of sourcing products, sometimes even creating their own products, all the way through the delivery of those products to your home with Amazon delivery trucks, and then even retail locations, their Amazon Go concept. Well, it's a great model, but in order to make that happen for all kinds of other retailers, it has to be built in sort of a more easily consumable way and a more generic way that can really broadly across multiple industries work and plug in quickly. I think the logistics industry is an interesting one because, you know, historically that you haven't seen too many companies focused on this. How do we enable same day delivery for any retailer? How can we offer that as a service? It's an interesting problem when you ask yourself. It's a lot of mechanics. It's warehousing, inventory management, it's logistics of actually transportation of the products, it's predictive stocking and warehousing of products, it's geolocation, geographic models around, you know, product demand. And those are a lot of the things that, you know, obviously Amazon has been working on. But when you start thinking about building horizontal companies to serve the needs of thousands and thousands of other retailers to enable that same thing to happen, it's a pretty interesting problem set with not one single company to come out and solve it. There's going to be a slew of new and interesting companies coming on market. And so those are some of the companies that I've been focusing on lately.
I'm going to pop this up from my buddy Alan Berkson over at Freshworks. What about community management? And maybe I'm going to frame in the standpoint of when you look at a company to potentially invest in, what role does their community play in that? And also, let me ask you, what about the ecosystem surrounding that company? What kind of how do those kind of things play into your decision making about whether to go try to invest or whether to kind of pull away?
I think community is more important than anything right now, in terms of how companies and retailers have had to transform. Because it used to be that you could actually, specialized products, and this is a category that I'm particularly fond of right now, because products, I'm just use one example, like outdoor sporting goods. Okay, the communities that are built around online outdoor sporting goods are vast and deep. I mean, people get super passionate about things like snowboards and skis, and like snowmobiles, and like all of these sporting products that are extremely complex. Like, you could have a community of people that really just talks about ski poles. Now, ski poles seem like a really basic product, but when you dig into it, the materials, how they're made, where you can buy them, which kind you should be using, the types of grips you can get, the kind of custom. There's this one company, I forget the name of it, that's actually making wooden ski poles, and there's some advantages to those, believe it or not, like taking us back 100 years. So I think that communities, like we know that customer reviews drive intelligence and create better transactions. In other words, I become more informed as a consumer, and I can engage with a brand and then make a more informed decision about a product that I want to buy. But now that things are moving more and more online and more quickly, I think the idea of community becomes incredibly more important. And so what I'm looking for, and what we're thinking about right now, are how do we bring more communities into not only the buying process, but the research and browsing and just awareness and discovery process, because that's where communities become extremely valuable. So I'm a musician myself on the side, and never played with these guys, but man, would have loved to have a chance. They probably would have kicked me out of the band. But musical instruments, oh my gosh, like the communities around, like you could spend days and days and days just reading about these, but there's no centralized place to really get all of that information. And so I think communities are going to have to evolve dramatically, and we're going to have to start centralizing this information, because that knowledge and that community, just the depth of the conversations and just the richness of the data that they create, if you could curate that, I think you'd have a really, really powerful capability, and maybe even a company of its own.
One other thing that just came to mind is, what if you saw this? You have your checklist of things that you look for in a company, and you're seeing like all of them just being ticked, like great tech, great management, great community around them, great ecosystem. But what if there's some kind of issues around how they're handling data, this privacy and things like that? And how much do you take that kind of stuff into consideration when you're kind of trying to make that final determination of all these things look great, but man, I don't know. This I see some possible red flags when it comes to data privacy.
Yeah, so I have a particular. This is very personal for me, because way back in the day, before everybody was losing their minds about privacy, and before, quite frankly, companies were collecting as much data about us as they are today, I co-founded a company we call Privacy Right. And that company back in 1999, 2000 era was starting to think about, what is the future about data collection? How do you intermediate? And could there be any way to ensure that if your personal information was out there with a single company or a group of companies, that it would be used in a way that was consistent with your, as the consumer, preferences? And so I've carried that thinking through over the last 20 years. And I think I think a lot of companies take it very, very seriously. Now, like let's just set aside the regulation that we all have to pay attention to, GDPR and HIPAA and PCI and all the things that are just table stakes nowadays. But I think the question becomes, what are consumers, whether or not there's regulation around it, what are their expectations and what are their needs, and what kind of companies are going to become really interesting for consumers based on trust? Because trust is over time, and we said this at Salesforce, we said it over and over, it was our mantra, that trust is our #1 priority. And I try to encourage every one of our companies, every one of the companies, certainly in my portfolio, and I know that Qualified has this as their top priority, and they're one of the things that they think about every single day. But you can't build trust with a consumer these days without actually demonstrating that you're putting them in control of their personal information, and you have complete 100% transparency around what their information is going to be used for. So it's that transparency combined with the controls around saying, okay, here's what we've collected, here's what we might do with it if you allow us to. And I think opt-in is a really important aspect to, is this an opt-in situation or an opt-out situation? You put the consumer in control, it should be opt-in in almost all cases. So I pay a lot of attention to that. And I think that, the trend is that consumers become more and more tuned into this, and they care more. And the building trust with brands is not just about, hey, here's what data we collect, read our privacy policy. It's about, hey, you know what? Let us give you the keys to the kingdom, your data, your personal data kingdom. I think that's the future. And companies that do that well, they're going to build more trust with their customers, and their customers will ultimately want to work with them and ultimately buy more over time.
Great answer. I want to hit you with this softball. Did I say this Alan guy was a friend of mine? I'm taking it back after this question. But anyway, how important is it for companies you invest in to have a band? He's asking for a friend.
Oh man. Well, so here's how I look at business. I think that we need to have balanced lives, and almost everyone, I know you certainly do, Brent. You got a million different hobbies and other interests outside of what you do professionally. I think that's really healthy. I think we all need to have something. One of the companies in my portfolio called Mind Tickle. It's a funny name, but these guys are just such great people. We've got half the people in India and half the people here in the United States. We got bands. We got the company bands have actually formed from this company. And I had this opportunity to join them for one of their company all hands the other day. And they had all 450 employees on there. And they asked me to, and this was a little nerve-wracking and certainly a little embarrassing. They asked me to perform a song on piano, which I reluctantly did, but luckily it didn't turn out like a total disaster. And I think they appreciate it. But then I got to watch all of the other employees do their thing. And there was some incredible musicians, like that right brain, left brain aspect of business and technology. I think it's so important. We do the same thing in Norwest. We got a band at Norwest. And we now during the pandemic, we've been rehearsing on the roof deck of our house, of my wife and my house here. I think it's a good way to kind of take your brain away from the tech and the data and the day-to-day grind of the business, and just kind of take yourself to another place. And so I like Alan's question. Actually, I'm not going to give him a hard time. I think it's a great question. I think bands are a great way to do that. Not the only way though. I think a lot of my partners and other investors at the firm, huge sports fans, just like you, Brent, and that's also a great way to take yourself away.
Oh, okay. All right. That's cool stuff. You know what? Sean mentioned some. Are you a DJ by chance? Are you a previous DJ or something?
Well, let's just say if you ever hired me to DJ a party of yours, you'd probably fire me right after that because I'm a terrible DJ. There was a time in my life where I had a group, and we did perform at all kinds of different, nightclubs and things like this. I used to play keyboards though. So I was like the live guy. And then I had a music partner who would DJ. We'd go side by side. And sometimes we'd have a singer that would join us. And sometimes we would have, a drummer, we'd have a percussionist and those kind of things. So we were trying to combine, house music and, that style, dance music with a lot of live elements. So that was the thing. So no, I was never really a DJ. I would, and in fact, don't ever invite me to your party thinking that I will be a DJ, because I will disappoint you.
Well, it sounds like you don't need to be a DJ, because as Sean is saying, you're a phenomenal musician with a studio in the basement. Now that's something I always wanted. So that's kind of cool. All right. But before my last question, let me get this. See, you got Freshworks apparently is using Mind Tickle for rolling out training. That's
cool. Great to hear. Great to hear, Alan. Oh, that's cool. Fantastic.
All right. I like when there's connections made here.
Yeah, I think you'd be happy. Yeah, happy with
All
it.
right. So one last thing, and this is kind of more I guess a little bit more meaty subject. But I've had several conversations going back to the end of last year, continuing to the beginning of this year, around kind of the lack of equity when it comes to VC money going to women-owned businesses and people of color.
Yep.
And I think it was Kate Bradley Chernis from Lately, trylately.com, I think is her website. But she said something to the effect of like only 2% of the VC money available goes to women-owned businesses, and it's like 0.1% if it's a Black woman-owned business. Yeah. So, and we had a conversation before we started, the broadcast a couple of weeks ago, where you were really, that was something that you really wanted to talk about with respect to your feelings, and also with Norwest Partners. So why don't you just take a few minutes to talk about that?
Yeah, well, thanks for bringing it up, Brent. For me, this is a really important area, and I'll just say this, that our industry does not have enough people of color and women. Full stop. We haven't done a great job in bringing underrepresented groups, supporting diversity, supporting inclusiveness, and I am very, very passionate about making sure that we do what we can to drive change here. And so one of the things that we're doing at Norwest, we're just focused right now heavily on prioritizing diversity across the firm, just not just within our portfolio, absolutely, in the broader venture ecosystem. And we're working on hiring more candidates of color on an investment team right now, and bringing on more entrepreneurs of color into our investment pipeline. And in June, we developed a working group. It was informed by a pledge to action that we publicly announced. It's really organized into 3 action teams. There's a hiring team, and their goal is to enable us to hire more candidates of color into our investment team. And that's something we take very, very seriously. And you and I talked about this before. If we've learned anything in our careers, diversity across just people from all different walks of life and bring different views and result in better outcomes. And I am 100% a big believer in this. And I just think that within the startup ecosystem, within the venture and investment community, there is so much more work to do here, and we will all be better if we can make progress there. The second group, though, in that is we call it the wiring group. And this group's plan of action is to bring more entrepreneurs of color into the investment pipeline and to invest in their companies. It's a very conscious effort, and it's something, again, that we take really seriously, and I personally take really seriously. And lastly, we call this the portfolio piece of this, is that it's a team designing programs and really just sharing resources that are actively going to support diversity and inclusion within our existing portfolio companies. And so, part of this is not just speaking the words, but actually walking the walk, and becoming part of great industry groups outside of Norwest is part of how we do this. And it's sporting, as we go out and we try to, meet new and cultivate new great entrepreneurs, maybe first-time entrepreneurs, which for me is really exciting because, we're working with groups that, support, underprivileged groups and, at the early education level. So I think that's where it starts. The earlier we can start, inspiring girls and people of color to get involved in things like coding and tech and just other areas within our industry, inspire some of them to become investors. That's something that I think is going to make the industry so much more powerful. And we're going to build better companies, and we're going to do better for the world in general. So I know that's a lot, but you and I talked about it at length, but something that I take very seriously and something that Norwest takes extremely seriously. So thanks for bringing it up. And I would encourage anyone who would love to get into the world of investing or has a great idea, and maybe you've never been an entrepreneur before, but you want to get involved, and we want to inspire folks to come to us, and we're a very, very welcoming group of people at Norwest, and welcome all people and all ideas. So please reach out to me anytime. Would love to hear from you.
And where can people do that? What's the best way for them to reach out to you?
One great way is just to, quite frankly, to email me. I mean, it's, kind of old fashioned, but hey, why not? sbeechuk@nvp.com. Send me an email, and would love to talk to you, one-on-one. And of course, we also have our careers.nvp.com site, which is a great way to go through, literally hundreds of different portfolio company opportunities. And if you see something that's interesting, reach out to me, because I might be able to help, teach you a little bit, just share a little bit more about that company, maybe what they're looking for, maybe even help in the process. But yeah, again, that's any way to engage is a great way to engage. And thanks a lot. Thanks again for bringing it up, Brent.
No, I absolutely. I think it's great. I love that. That's your perspective on that, and I'm glad that you feel like you want to do something to change that. So that's great. By the way, Sean said that the Browns last won a NFL championship. So right there, we know it wasn't Super Bowl. Was 1964.
Oh, yeah, right around the time before my parents got married, and I wasn't even a sparkle in their eye. But hey, you know what? I'm sure my dad was guaranteed watching that game, because he grew up in Cleveland. My parents both grew up in Cleveland, and so he's been a Browns fan from the beginning of time.
Well, that's good, because they used to, like, I think they won 7 championships in 10 years back in the 40s and 50s or something like that. So that's cool. And sorry, dude, like the Detroit, we're going back into the 50s for them. So it's it's been a little rough. But hey, I appreciate you spending time here and talking about this, because I think all that you said is interesting, and as well, it's a lot of it is important, and particularly that last part. I'm so glad that you were able to talk about that some. So hey, man, let's definitely do this sooner rather than later, because this is a lot of fun.
Would love to. Hey, Brent, it's a real honor. And again, you and I go way back, and I really love reconnecting with you. You're one of the nicest guys on the planet. I was just talking to your guest from yesterday, Adam Blitzer, about this, and we both agree. It's kind of like it's a saying, if you don't like Brent Leary, there must be something wrong with you. We should probably talk. Appreciate everything you do, man.
All the bill collectors, listen to what he just said. Okay. Thanks, man. And we'll definitely be catching up sooner rather than later.
Sounds good. Thanks again.